What's going on, everyone? My name is Brandon, and welcome to my Giada Font of Hope deck tech for the Commander format, and specifically for the playgroup I've been playing at weekly for the past 2 to 3 years. So this is definitely a deck I have experience with, as I kind of have to stop bringing it out weekly just because I have so much fun with it. It doesn't feel repetitive at all, even though you're just stomping everyone with a bunch of angels over their head. So what's special about my format that I play in is our playgroup is bigger than 4 players. Usually we're playing between 5 to 8, 8 on the higher end, 5 about average. And that changes some of the dynamics of how you want to build your deck, and what kind of cards you'd consider over other cards. This format that I play in is not like optimized, like it's nowhere near a CDH format. It's still an expensive deck. This deck is about $1,000 Canadian, because I am up north. And that's just from like, I just want shiny cards. That has nothing to do with like money to power ratio. Like that doesn't correlate at all. It's just cards I like. So let's break down the commander and just kind of explain why I've picked Giada versus some other angel commanders or mono white commanders, because this deck has had different variations. I've taken it apart, put it back together, swapped commanders, tried different things. But in a casual format, just having that early turn 2 blocker, she is a 2-mana angel, 2/2 flying vigilance. If you haven't seen flying vigilance play out in casual commander, you probably don't understand how broken flying vigilance is together. Being able to essentially be unblockable to half the table and then be able to block for the other half is just so nice. Especially with this deck, I tend to make an arch enemy of myself. Even though I'm playing nice, I'm not playing anything like too crazy. Like there's no Dranith the Magistrate. There is a couple stacks pieces, but it's not leaning into pure stacks. But I'll get into that later when we get to it. Her other effect that lets your angels get bigger. So each other angel you control is going to enter the battlefield with an additional 1/1 counter on it for each other angel you control. So what this means is if you have Giada and another angel out, and say you play a third angel, that third angel is going to enter with 2 1/1 counters because there's currently 2 other angels it sees on the battlefield besides itself. So what this equates to is over a longer game, which our format usually is at least 10 turns, sometimes less, sometimes more, depending on the commanders, you're just going to overrun everyone unless there's board wipes, which there is a lot of. So we have some recursion, but just keep in mind with building this deck, and if you're looking to try and copy it or lean towards the style, the context is very important, that I am kind of trying to grind the table out rather than spit out my angels and like cheat them out with like from the hand or from the deck. I'm playing fair angels, where basically every card in here is just a value engine, and yeah, we'll get into that. So first I will get into the lands. Let's do it. All right, so let's get into the lands here. 2 things to keep in mind is I play against Blood Moon, and I play against someone that plays Flash Fires, which if you're not familiar with what that is and never been traumatized, it wipes out all the planes. So I tried to find a happy medium between basics and non-basics. There's a total of 37 lands in the deck, which might seem kind of high. I think I used to run like as low as 32 when I started the deck, maybe 31. But just like player experience and just getting better at the game, I just find this deck you need lands, like with all the removal in our format being multiplayer, like multiplayer, 5+ people. You need, by turn 10, you need 10 mana. So mono white, like I just need lands, so I'm happy to run a few more. So we will break them down by non-basics first. All right, I'll start. I'm only running 2 MDFCs right now. If I get more, then I will include them. Onto Inversion, which is, I don't think I've ever played that as the board wipe, but it just makes me sleep better at night knowing it's in there. Same with Razor Grouse Ambush. It's from Modern Horizons 3. and it just basically instant does 3 damage to an attacking or blocking creature, which for the most part can come up, but it's usually just a land that I play tapped or I shock myself with. Nothing more to say that other than it feels weird not playing them. All right, so now I've got the non-basic white mana generating lands. All right, so we've got Monumental Henge, which is basically untapped if you have a plains, which is most of the time, and it lets you search off the top for historic spells, which comes up fairly often. I don't know the exact percentage of them coming up, I apologize. Iganjo, Seat of the Empire, is also just a free land. It's untapped white, and you can channel it for 3. Giada is always out on turn 2, so after turn 2, it's essentially a 2 mana channel effect to do what Razor Grass Ambush does. So there's basically 2 copies of that. Secluded Step is just a free channel. Coming in tapped sucks, but just being able to draw off it feels nice. And Windbrisk Heights is mostly in there just because the Surge Foil is nice. But the Hideaway 4 can come up, especially if you have like a big angel like Abyssin, or even like a 6 mana or 5 mana one, just being able to pay 1 mana to do it. And you can attack with 3 or more creatures fairly easily in this deck. So this is also just a free auto include. All right, so now for the colorless lands, I try to keep them to a minimum, but they're just free land slots as well. So far, I haven't had too much of an issue with like not hitting enough white mana. But the only one I think I might cut is the Diamond City, just because sometimes you don't have 2 or more creatures enter the battlefield, which is what you need to have happen to move the shield counter it comes in with on. I don't know if I said that right. It comes in with on. Either way, it comes in with the shield counter on it, and the way to move it is to have 2 or more creatures enter your battlefield this turn. Horrible explanation, but sometimes it just sits there, but other times it is nice to be able to put it onto either Giada or like a bigger creature. But because like we have Avacyn, we're not scared of like destruction removal. It's exile removal that we're scared of, and the shield counter doesn't help with that either way, so I might cut this for another plains. Reliquary Tower is nice in this deck. I don't throw it in every deck, but this one I really try to emphasize card draw. I might have overdone it a little bit, so sometimes Reliquary Tower is just kind of needed to stop you from discarding down. Especially since I do play against a couple Terragrid decks where discarding kind of gives them their stuff, you kind of want the Reliquary Tower. Seraph Sanctuary is another free one in this deck, in the sense that you gain a life whenever an angel hits your battlefield. It won't be the craziest amount of life gain over the duration of the duel, but it's just like, if it's not in the deck, it just kind of feels weird to not have it, right? So it's in there. Hidden Grotto is basically a survey land, so when it enters the battlefield, you get to survey 1, which means you get to either put it in your graveyard or back on top, which is just nice. There's not many lands that do that. You can get the scry ones, but survey is just a little better, just because you can manipulate your graveyard sometimes. And otherwise, it's just a colorless untapped land. Myriad Landscape just helps you ramp into 2 plains. It coming into play sucks, but I don't feel bad having it in the deck at all. Alright, so the next little package we have are the best lands in the deck, and if you can afford it, every monocolor deck and travel deck should have these cards. So we will start with 3 Tree City, which when it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. In this, we're always choosing angels. And it taps for a colorless mana, comes in untapped, noted, and you can pay 2 to activate to tap effect to choose a color and add an amount of that color equal to the amount of that creature type you have. So if you choose angels and you pay 2 mana while you have 3 or more angels out, it will tap for 3 or more mana, which is really hard to find in these colors. And Nykthos, Shrine of Nyx, is essentially the same thing, but for devotion. which is just like, it's so good. It's, yeah, just rewarding you for playing more. But the only thing I'll say is if you don't have a board state and you get blown up a lot and you're just constantly wiped, they're kind of dead. So you do need to have like a win setup going on to actually start winning more. But now the next two support cards, both from Modern Horizons 3, I have Deserted Temple, which is a colorless land, and you can pay 1 to tap it to untap another land. So with either of these two, that just essentially almost doubles the amount of mana they produce. And then Urza's Cave is another colorless land that you can pay 3 and sacrifice it, and then go and fetch any land from your deck, which is going to be either of these two, or if you do have those two, you can just grab the temple or any other land you would like, except your MDFCs. So yeah, that is all of the non-basic lands. I try to cut them down to a minimum. For the most part, like, all of them do have a use. And, like, yeah, if you're playing budget-wise, like, a couple of these you wouldn't run. But I just find they all serve a purpose. Now, onto the basics. I believe, yeah, so I'm running 15 non-basics, which would put me down at 22 planes essentially, which is a solid number. I don't have like all the same artwork, I just have different ones if you would like to see here. And I do have 1 snow covered planes because I run Search for Glory, which is just another way to consistently get planes into my hand. And that is all of our land cards. So let's move on to, I think I'm running one battle and 1 planeswalker. So we'll move on to that next. Okay, so moving on to the planeswalker and battle of choice that I run. I'm immediately going to sell you on these cards by telling you that they are very cuttable. I personally just like them because they fill a lot of different roles, and they're both very free cards with their effects. You're going to hear the term free a lot because I like running cards that will reward me for doing what I was going to do anyways, which is playing angels and attacking people. So breaking down, I have Elspeth Resplendent. She's a 5-mana planeswalker. Her top ability lets you basically put a 1/1 counter or like a keyword counter, so like flying, vigilance, lifelink, first strike. But I play her mostly because of the -3, which is allowing you to look at the top 7 and put a permanent mana value 3 or less, which is essentially just ramp, which is hard to find in white. And I just have a really nice copy of it that I just like looking at. The -7 though, if that comes up, that can be quite devastating with Giada out. -7 to make 5 3/3 angels, which the 3/3s normally aren't that bad, but if they're entering with like 3 or 4 1/1 counters, that's a small army on a stick right there, which is quite nice. But like I said, it does keyword utility, it does ramping, and it can also be a bomb if it gets left alone for a while. And more utility is going to be, I don't know how to properly pronounce it, but it's just Invasion of Gobakan. It's basically super free as well because you get Giada down turn 2, and then you play this on turn 3 and you're already ready to attack it. It's only got 3 siege counters on it, so you can basically 2-shot it with a commander. When it enters the battlefield, you get to look at an opponent's hand and exile a non-land card from it. They can still cast it, and I would argue it's probably worse in my format with more than 5 people because you're only getting 1 person out of all of them. But the funny thing that I like to do is usually just target someone that I think might have like the strongest cards, and then just exile something that makes them look like they're a threat, and then people will kind of focus on that instead. But when you get to flip it, it's also really nice because it's protection and more aggression, you could say. So at the beginning of your end step, you can put a 1/1 counter on each creature that attacked this turn, which is very free in a deck full of creatures with flying and vigilance. And then you can also sacrifice it to give your creatures indestructible and hexproof. This comes up so many times where you just have like this and Flawless Maneuver, and your board is just so safe from any wipes. Yeah, it's just incredible. Both of these can be cut for whatever you want. I personally just like them because they offer really nice utility. And now we're going to move on to the creatures. All right, so talking about the creatures, this is really the main point of the deck. It's a tough balance to... I mean, like with Giada, you want to be running a lot of angels, and unfortunately a lot of angels are high cost. There are a few lower cost ones, but most of them aren't really the best. What I've kind of done is I have a lot of 4-5 mana angels, just so that way you can go turn 2 Giada and then turn 3 pump out a decent threat and start applying pressure. But it's just tough to get around playing all the low cost ones. Like you have to have some big threats in here. So I think I'm running around 22 angels and then about 25 non-angel creatures. And that's worked out pretty good so far. I pretty much can't really cut anything in the deck anymore. It's quite tight now. So I'll break down the non-angel creatures because they're in here for pretty important reasons, and yeah, I don't think I'd cut either of these. Serra Ascendant is like one of the most broken cards in the deck. Just a turn 1 6/6 flyer is just so gross. Even in like a bigger format like I'm playing in, it can make you a target, but just being able to start, progressing the game. If not, you're going to be sitting there for like a 2-3 hour game. And then for ramp, I run Weathered Wayfarer and Knight of the White Orchid. White Orchid is basically like an auto include. You can run Loyal Warhound. I think that's pretty much the same thing. Weathered Wayfarer is just really cracked in this deck because most of the time you're not going first with that many players, and you can just go and grab your Nykthos and go and grab any land you want, essentially. It's so good. And then really good as well is Esper Sentinel, probably one of the most broken cards in the deck. Esper Sentinel is just cracked, really. Mangar the Diplomat got a nice reprint. Thank God it's not $15 anymore. It's also a very rare form of card draw in mono white, essentially. And that is literally the only non-angel creatures in the deck. All right, breaking down the angels, we'll go from low cost to high cost. Youthful Valkyrie is really nice. 2 mana angel that's a 1/3, and it gets a 1/1 counter every time an angel hits. So even though I'm not making like infinite angels or anything, this thing will just get quite large. And being turn 2 as well, it's just a nice early game blocker. Now we move to the 3 costs. I have 5 of them. All right, so I choose to run Inspiring Overseer. It's just a 2/1 that gains a life and draws a card, but it replaces itself, which this deck, if you can have every card replace itself, that would be ideal. So this is just one more card towards that. Wojek Investigator is one of the newer angels. It's 2/4 Flying Vigilance, and it gives you a clue token in your upkeep for each opponent who has more cards than you. Since I'm running 5+ players in my pod, this one usually can generate a couple clues, which isn't the most efficient, but just any card draw helps in this deck. Probably the best one of all the 3 cost angels is going to be the Righteous Valkyrie. Just giving you the 2/2 Anthem when your life total is 7 more. It's not hard to do in this deck, and it's quite good. It also gives you life gain when other stuff enters, which is nice with Giada because both of them are replacement effects. So you can just choose to have your creature enter with the counters, and then you can do the life gain, so you get a little bit extra. Metropolis Reformer. This one I cut for a bit, but it's one of those cards where it just feels like I feel like I'm doing the deck in service or disservice by not running it. It's a 2/3 Flying Vigilance, but it gives you hexproof. In my pod, we do run a lot of curses, a lot of like, what is it, Identity Crisis, where target opponent exiles their hand, like just really gross stuff. So having something like this in the deck can really just save you so much. I can't even describe what it feels like to sit there for 45 minutes in an 8-player game, and you have no cards in your hand, and you just got to pass and wait until the next turn cycle. Like, yeah, it's just a horrible feeling. It also has a little bit of life gain as well. And then the last one is going to be Resplendent Angel, which at the beginning of each end step, if you gain 5 or more life, it makes a 4/4 angel. But that angel also has vigilance, which is really busted as well. If any of your stuff has lifelink, this is just really easy to start generating tokens. And that's all the 3 cost and 2 cost angels. All right. Now moving on to some of the bigger guys. We'll start with our 4 costs. I did get a From the Vault edition, so you'll notice some of the cards have like similar foils. So even though some of these angels aren't ideal, there's a lot better options as well. I just like having consistent foiling with some of these. So one of the newer cards is going to be Archangel of Tides, which is basically like a mini ghost prison for when you block and attack, which is kind of gross sometimes. And then we've got Angel of Jubilation, which is an anthem for your non-black creatures. But this is one of the few cards that we use just to hold our opponents off, and it prevents our opponents from paying life or sacking creatures to cast spells or activate abilities. I think the only thing it hurts us with is like the Flare of Fortitude. I don't think I really have anything else that cares about this at all. Thraben Watcher, very cheap angel, but it is very efficient at what it does, at giving all of your other angels vigilance, which is, as I was saying in the intro there, flying and vigilance is just very gross together, and I've realized that. So the more I can kind of add it to the deck, the better. Fireman Commando is kind of nice. It's very rare card draw, like I was saying, as well on an angel. The downside, though, is it makes our opponents draw cards too. So I've kind of been contemplating cutting it because of that, but we'll see. And then last one, we got Gisela, the Broken Blade. One of the two to meld and make Brazella, which surprisingly I can make pretty consistently. The downside, though, is like Brazella's good, but I find it needs more protection. It gets removed quite fast. And that's the 4. So I think, yeah, what is it? 4, 5. All right, now I'll do 5 costs. We've got Norn's Choir Master. I've cut this one, but then I've added it back in just because it's actually really good. It reads not as good as it plays out. So it's a 5/4 flying first strike. And whenever your commander enters the battlefield or attacks, you get to proliferate. And we're not really playing too much with poison or fully maximizing on the proliferate, but you only need a couple angels really on the battlefield to start going off with this. Also, a flying first strike blocker is one of the best things you can have as a blocker. So I'm usually not attacking with this. Next, we've got Herald of the Host. It is a 4/4 flying vigilance myriad. And that's it. That's all you need. Myriad is kind of cracked. It's not as broken as you'd like, because if you have this out and another angel like Giada, they would all enter and just get the bump from these two. They wouldn't see each other entering, so it's not as good, but it's still quite good. This is the newest card. I haven't actually had this one come out and play yet. Windshaper Planeteer. Flash flying, when it enters, you get to change which attacking creatures are attacking, essentially. In theory, in my pod, we play quite a lot of token decks, so something like this can actually really kind of change the game in your favor. So I was thinking of adding this, but I haven't had it come up yet, but we will see. Next one, we got Lyra Dawnbringer. This is another angel people run as a commander. I tried running her myself. Flying first strike lifelink, and it gives your angels a 1/1 anthem and lifelink, which is nice. But it doesn't really like generate card advantage at all. So it's kind of just, she just kind of sits there sometimes. Next, I have Baneslayer Angel. This is just a card just because it matches the foiling of the other ones, but it's also somewhat relevant for a couple people run. I play against a Tiamat deck. There's 2 Ur-Dragon decks. There's like a Karthus deck. Demons, yeah, someone plays like Be'lakor. So there are some relevancies to like the protection from demons and dragons. It's just another way to help, like with the lifelink and stuff. You can help turn on your other angel tokens as well. So it works. Herald of War. Now this is one of the more expensive ones. Whenever it attacks, you get to put a 1/1 counter on it. But what's nice is it gives a 1 cost reduction for each 1/1 counter on it to your angels and humans. And usually this thing gets destroyed like immediately. I don't think I've had this survive like more than a turn cycle, because it'll come out with 3 counters. People know next turn that you're spitting out like 2-3 angels, and it's probably going to be it. So this one is, I just kind of use as like a lightning rod to protect my other stuff. All right, now we got 6 costs. All right, so one of my favorite angels is Valkyrie Harbinger. It's 4/5 flying lifelink, and it's another one of these cards at the beginning of your end step. If you gain 4 more life, you get to make another angel with flying and vigilance. So this is just a card where if you leave it alone, I'm just going to start accruing angels, and it's not going to be nice. So I like that it has lifelink, so it kind of gets itself going. You don't need to have like another thing out giving lifelink, which is cool. A tech card that I like is Steel Seraph. It is a 6-mana angel that you can pay 3 for the prototype cost. But on the beginning of your combat, you can give a creature you control flying, vigilance, or lifelink. So whatever keyword I feel like I'm missing, I can just kind of help fill that in. I have thought of going more on the keyword route, like thinking of running Ojeric just to help move them around, but honestly, like, yeah, I just like that it's a side thing and it's not really a focus. I feel like if I was to focus on it more, it might take away just from like the ability of this deck to generate card advantage. So we'll see though. I run Sanctuary Warden as well. Speaking of card advantage, this one's kind of sick. It's not strong enough to the point where people target it right away, but it's like still pretty good. So it enters with 2 shield counters on it, and then also when it enters or attacks, you can remove a counter from a creature you control. So usually if something has a lot of counters, I can just take one off no problem and keep the shield counters on it. And then you can just draw a card and make a citizen token. Mostly there just for the card draw. All right, so now we have 7 costs, and there's only 2. Bruna is going to be the other half of the meld with Gisela. But what's nice is she also like recurs from the graveyard, so we don't have to run like an extra recursion spell. It's just kind of built into the engine, which is pretty sweet. And then finally you have Angel of Ruins, which I'm not fully sold on yet. I'm mostly just plain cycling it, but if it does enter, you can exile up to 2 artifacts and enchantments. But I would just prefer like a mass removal, just because, like I said, I'm playing with 5+ people, so it's not always the best. So we'll see. That's like one of the ones I'm contemplating. And then our biggest one is going to be Avacyn, Angel of Hope. This is basically half of a 2-card combo with any of your board wipes except Farewell, just because you can just wipe every permanent on the battlefield and keep yours, and everyone should concede at that point. If not, you just beat them down until they concede or they die. That is the angel package. There's definitely stronger angels you could run. There's some very expensive cards I still have yet to get for this deck, but I find this ratio so far has worked out pretty good. I would maybe cut 1 or 2 of them for some more like early game card draw, but that's just what I'm working with right now, and the win rate has been very good, so no complaints so far. Next, we're going to move on to our instant and sorceries. So we'll get into that next. All right, so our interaction package and removal. Our instants are going to be broken down between protection and removal, and then I have two that are kind of multi-slots here. I would like to run more, but the deck is just tight with the ratios at this point. This is the absolute minimum I'm willing to run just with everything else. The one thing I will say is perch protection here when I get to it. If I could, I would swap this for a Teferi's protection. I just don't have a Teferi's protection right now, so that's the only thing about that. So for protection, I run Orum's Chant, which lets you stop your opponent from casting spells or attacking on a turn, which is just so, like, when I do that to people, their face, they get so upset because they think you're like targeting them and being personal, which you are, but they should just take it as a compliment, like you're scared that you're gonna die to them. I get, like, you could cut it. It's basically just a fog, but it, like, the fact it's a fog and a silence in one is just like, there's nothing else that does that. I wouldn't cut that. And then our free spell is going to be Flawless Maneuver, which you could cast for free while your commander's out, which is going to be almost all the time, just to protect your board. So this, with any board wipe, is pretty much a 2-card combo to almost win the game. And then our other free is going to be Flare of Fortitude, which is going to prevent our life total from changing and give our permanents hexproof and indestructible. If it is like a bad enough spell I'm trying to avoid, I will just sack my commander, no problem to this. That's what it's there for. This is part of a 2-card combo. I say 2-card combo loosely because they're basically just like asymmetrical board wipes when I say 2-card combo. Fate's Rewards. So you get to return to the battlefield all permanents in your graveyard that were put there this turn. So some people in my pod do run like mass land destruction. So this, like I said, someone, like I said earlier, someone plays flash fires. So even in, like, not with my own board wipes, I can just hold this up. And if someone board wipes everyone else, it pretty much just gives me the game by bringing everything else back. So this is really nice, and I'll explain why this is in here with a card later on. And then the final card is going to be Perch Protection. I don't mind gifting an extra turn to someone. There's a couple people there that are nicer than others that I will happily give the turn to. Yeah, I'm only running this because it's just a budget Teferi's protection. Just get Teferi's protection. All right, so for removal, I only run 3 targeted removal specifically. So Swords of Plowshare is just auto include. I have had a couple times where I will just swords my own creature if it gets big enough, just from dying to burn damage. Same with Path to Exile. Sometimes I will literally just exile my own Giada or something and just help ramp out a bit more. Nothing more to say than that. It's good for your opponents, good for yourself. They're great. Soul Partition is a card I like running in most of my white decks because it's a 2-mana instant that pretty much exiles any non-land permanent, which is just so nice. They can recast it, but the 2 more is usually like, we'll hold them off for a couple turns, and people know that they can cast it, so it makes them a target as well. And then the 2 flex spots are going to be a Final Showdown because it does a little bit of everything. It protects a creature, it wipes all creatures, and then it wipes all abilities from creatures. So this one is just kind of like Orum's Chant, where it's just like a flex card. And then Akroma's Will is basically just a finisher. It can be protection, but I think I've almost always used it just as a way to kill someone, essentially. And that is all of my instants. So almost everything in there has like multiple rules just because there's so few slots for removal. But I leave a lot of that up to my sorceries. So my sorceries are broken down into removal and essentially non-removal. So for removal, You can tell as well, I like matching my From the Vault foils. My cheeky card here is Cataclysm, which most pods would not be cool with, I would imagine. Each player chooses from amongst them a permanent, from an artifact, a creature, enchantment, and a land, and you sacrifice the rest. The land part specifically is what's going to piss people off, but because other people do decide to run mass land destruction, I kind of throw it in there as well just to counter-salt them. But if you do this with base reward and you wipe everyone's lands and then bring all of your lands back to the battlefield and you're sitting there with a full board while everyone's at one land, for the most part, that's going to be a good game. Same with Wrath of God, Vanquish the Horde, Hour of Revelation, any of these with like Avacyn or any of your like protection spells is just a 2-card combo to just almost win the game, which is how I try to go with this deck. If not, you just kill everyone else's stuff and you just kill them with angels. And then the final board wipe is Farewell. This one is so good, but a lot of times like I'm stuck with it in hand because I'm the one with the big board and no one's dealing with my stuff, so it's just kind of dead. But you can also just use it to get rid of graveyards, like if you need. I don't really need to explain why Farewell's that good because there's just so many videos explaining why it's good. And then the only other 2 sorceries I run is Savine's Reclamation, because we do play against a couple Mothman decks and a couple Mill decks. And it's also just, I feel like an auto include in white decks, just being able to recur itself and then bring your permanents back, it's very nice. And then we run the 1 Search for Glory. This is why I'm running the snow-covered plains, just because it turns this into a land search. But for the most part, I'm searching for like the other piece of Brazella, or honestly, there's just so many good cards to search off of this. It just depends in the moment what you're grabbing. But it searches for a snow permanent, a legendary card, or a saga card. When I had Urza Saga, it was a good way to fetch that as well. And then on to next, we will have our enchantments and artifacts. All right, so the deck is fairly artifact light. There is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 artifacts. Not all of them ramp. This deck probably could use some more ramp, but again, I've chosen to go the more kind of slow and consistent route where I'm usually just getting consistent land drops, and by like turn 5, 6, I'm gonna start dropping my angels, or my board state's already been established. So I'm not too concerned as much as ramping as much as I am like just getting card advantage and just keep drawing cards and just keep dumping down threats, because almost every turn the board's going to get wiped and you just need to keep having threats to keep putting down. So in terms of ramp, I run Soul Ring, which is basically an auto include in every deck. Star Compass, just because it's a mana rock that taps for white. It could be any other mana rock. Honestly, it's just what I have on hand. Pearl Medallion is an auto include, reducing all your white spells by 1 mana, making Giada essentially a 1 mana creature, which is so nice. And then we also have Dousing Dagger, which is my other form of ramp, because you can by turn 3 effectively have a land that taps for triple mana. So yeah, this is one of the ways that you can double your mana quite fast. And then the rest are just essentially utility. So I have Expedition Map, which is just going to help me find my best lands in my deck, just for more consistency. And then I have Moonsilver Key, which is going to search for a basic land or an artifact with a mana ability. So it's basically just going to find my Soul Ring or my Star Compass, or just help get me another land even later on in the game, like turn 4 or 5. Getting another land is quite nice. And then I also run Ghost Vacuum as just my 1 piece of graveyard hate, but it's also a card that if you leave for a while and I tap for 6 mana to activate it, I'm probably putting in a lot of stuff. So it's just another card that my opponents are going to have to burn removal on. Same with burning removal. Door of Destinies is another one. you get to choose a creature type when it enters, which is going to be angels pretty much every time. And whenever you cast an angel, it's going to get a counter, which is going to buff your angels for each counter on it. So it's also another card that they are going to have to remove or else they die, if you haven't noticed a theme yet here. And then the final card I have is Endless Atlas. This one's pretty easy to turn on. Sometimes, I think maybe 2 times it hasn't been able to go live just because I've drawn non-basic lands. But it's one of the very few ways of just getting cards. Like the 2 mana can be kind of painful to pay sometimes, but right now I just don't have another way to draw cards for such little cost. So it's in there over a mana rock. I'd prefer that. Now, moving on to enchantments, there's not that many, but these enchantments are actually very insane and probably some of the strongest cards in the deck, more so than the angels themselves. So the first one is going to be one of the newest cards, is Charitable Levy. It's one of the few tax cards we have. It's going to stop non-creature spells by making them 1 more to cast, which can be nice since we're trying to go into later turns. And it's also built-in card draw. It replaces itself, and it gets you a land. So I feel like it's almost an auto-include. This one's in Japanese, but Luminarch Ascension. This is, I think I've won the most games with this card over any other card in the deck, especially in a bigger pod. So what it does is at the beginning of each opponent's end step, if I haven't lost life on that turn, I get to put a counter on it. And then if I have 4 more counters, I can pay 2 mana to just put a 4/4 angel onto the battlefield. So in a 5+ player meta, I play this on turn 2 or turn 3 when I have a blocker out with my commander. I'm pretty much guaranteed to have this turn on, and then turn 3 I'm just starting to spit out angels. And there's been turns when I've just been able to go 2 mana angel, 2 mana angel, 2 mana angel, 2 mana angel, and just start making things insane. This is the definition of get rid of this card or else you die. All right, so we've got 2 3 mana enchantments. One's going to be Rule of Law, which is more of a newer card I've thrown in. I was kind of torn on putting it in, but after seeing it play out, I feel like it's almost an auto-include with Giada. Just being able to slow down everyone else. For the most part, you're just tapping out to play 1 angel, or if you have protection, you're not doing too much, I'm going to be honest. So Rule of Law just really helps put everyone else on the same pace as you. And it's also a card that people are going to be triggered to remove. So if they remove that, that just helps open you up to start doing other stuff as well. So win-win. Kind of a funny card. I run 4 Nox. It's got Vanishing 4. In the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you just draw a card. It's just basically a slower Phyrexian Arena that goes away. Yeah, maybe you can proliferate it with the Choir Master, but for the most part, it's just a 3 mana slow draw 3. But what's nice is it doesn't draw your opponent's cards like Secret Rendezvous. So you can also recur it with Savine's Reclamation, which can be nice. I've done that a couple times, but it's just one of the ways that I just want to draw cards. This deck just needs to draw cards, so any way I can, I totally will. And another way to do that is Court of Grace. It gives you the Monarchy, and I think I can't remember a time where I've really lost the Monarchy just because you already have flying blockers that are so strong. People don't want to attack you because they know if they attack you, you're incentivized just to go and swing back at them, which they don't want. So this one's really nice, and it also makes angels. So it just kind of fits the theme of having cards that make angel tokens as well as just do other things and present a threat. And then the last card in the deck is also very broken, Smothering Tithe. I don't run this in every white deck just because it's one of the cards I feel bad running it. It's just so good. Especially in a 5 to 8 player meta, 8 treasure tokens minimum per turn cycle is just so gross. This alone will pay for your deck. And it's a card that people will just Honestly, like, I don't know why people don't get rid of this more. Like, by the time it's someone's turn, they're like, oh, you've got 3 treasures already? Sure, just have your treasures. No one's gonna pay 2 mana for it, so... and it just scales up. Like, if people start playing Rhystic Studies, or we have a couple Nekuzar players, this basically just infinite mana. It's just ridiculous. If you have the money for it, you throw it in your deck. There's really no downside to it. And that is the deck. Yeah, so overall, like, it's a great deck, really. Like, you don't need to have the foiled out blinged versions like I do. And even for the price of this deck, there is such a higher ceiling than what I've presented today. This is just my take on it, so hopefully that gave you some ideas and some inspirations. I will have a deck list linked below to my Moxfield deck if you want to see some more, I guess, like card by card breakdown and kind of want to read the cards yourselves or just see how it looks laid out. Yeah, so I will try and work on some more videos. If not, then have a great day and hopefully see you guys in the future. Thank you for your time. Bye.